Okay, so now we're up to the cut page. Now, with the cut page, what we're really trying to do with the cut page is generate sort of like a third generation of editing. You know, if you think back, we had linear editing in the 1970s and 1980s. Then it went to non-linear editing with editing software in the sort of late 80s and early 90s. But there hasn't been a lot of innovation since. You know, there's been some very good incremental updates. There's also been much better availability of editing software. But we wanted to do something sort of bigger. We wanted to create a next generation. And so, you know, the problem we've got, well, what we essentially want to do is a combination of hardware and software. We thought that was really the way to go. You know, traditional editing software is really designed to work with a mouse. And so the difficulty, of course, is trying to add any sort of hardware integration, and that's quite difficult. With the cut page, what we really focused on was designing a page that would work with hardware. Now, the DaVinci Resolve editor keyboard is very traditional, but it's really the first step that we took. But it is very traditional. It's got the QWERTY keyboard, so it's kind of more like a keyboard that would work with a normal edit software. What we really wanted to do is go further, because that panel is really designed for older edit software in many ways because of the QWERTY keyboard. So we've been working on something else, and that's where really our focus was. So what I want to do is introduce the DaVinci Resolve Speed Editor. Now it's different to a regular edit keyboard, and I'll bring one out. I've got one here. You see it there. Now it's different to a regular keyboard because it's only got the key specifically designed for the cut page. And so it's faster, it's much faster to use. But what I'll do is I really want to show you the cut page features first. So I'll come back to the speed editor later and then I'll show you how that works. It'll be a bit less confusing that way. So let's go over to the computer. I'll put this down here. I've actually got an overhead camera.
I thought the cut
so I'll put that in the right position so we can
really
play with it later. But what I'll do is I'll go across to the computer here and we'll create a new project and keep going, and I'll show you what's new on the cut page.
There was a lot more
so if you can cut across to the UI.
To see what they've done
Okay, the first thing we want to do is create a new project. Demo. There's one, go to the cut page. Okay, now we'll need to load in some clips. And I've got some clips here on the desktop. I'll load in these. Here we go. Now I'll also need to create a new timeline. Now these are handheld shots I took in London. So what we'll do is let's create an edit first. So we'll go into the clips and we'll look for a demo clip. That looks pretty good. Put an in point, put an out point there. And let's find another clip and do the same. There's a nice clip. Now, one of the new things in DaVinci Resolve is you can now manually edit durations. So I've got a nice 5-second clip there. I can drop that into the timeline. So I've got a nice edit. However, let's use the source tape because this is actually how normally you would edit, but it's a little slow. So by using the source tape, we can look at all our media in one go.
I like
so
how
let's
you
go
just
up here and
slide
select
through
the source tape.
That's kind of a big
now I'm
deal,
looking at everything I've got.
Now we can finally select the amount of duration we want. I've been wanting that for
so let's go and find a clip.
That way, because now I can build up like
select
if I got like
point.
a 60-second ads commercial I need
an
to
out
edit,
point.
I can now just put out the exact
let's also find another clip
I want and then sort of trim it
There's a
and
nice
tweak
clip of
it
people
and
walking.
fix it up at
Scroll on a little.
So big deal.
Out point in the pen. But we can also do a smart insert. So if you want to insert, you can see the indicator here. So if I find a different clip, like this one here, that looks pretty nice, I can just go smart insert here and it'll insert it at this transition point, at this edit point here. See, there it is. Okay, so now we've got a nice little edit. Now what's really exciting about the new cut pages is better transitions and a whole new palette design. So if we, first off, because we're going to be adding some transition, let's enlarge the view a little bit. You can see we can enlarge that now here, and then we can get a better view on what we're doing. So if we go to the transitions palette, we can see a whole bunch of new transitions, and you can roll over the transitions to try them out. So let's have a look. So we've got the normal sort of, dissolves, and I can roll over some wipes. Got some wipes here. And I've also got fusion transitions down the bottom here. So I can do all kinds of interesting things. And that one's kind of interesting, isn't it? Noise dissolve and burn away. So what we can do is we can add the transition just by dropping it onto the edit. And there it is there. So we've got a nice new palette of transitions in the new cut page. And so I can play that. And let's play through. Oh, nice. And I can also change the duration any way I want, and it'll then change the way the edit plays. Now we also have new effects in a new effects palette. So I can go up to the effects, and you can see all the effects. There's a lot of effects in here. So you can see I've got a whole range of different effects. I've got all kinds of like blurs. There's a zoom blur, which is kind of cool. There's a mosaic. All kinds of interesting features. I've got stylize effects, color effects, generators. Here's some of the stylize effects. Some of them are quite dramatic. Emboss. Vignette. We've also got some other ones like stylize effects, texture effects. One's really fun one is analog damage, and I'm really shocked about how well it does. I'll drag it down. It's really quite amazing. It looks like an old VHS machine, and it's really quite accurate in what it does. So you can see if I play that, it really looks like an old VHS machine. Now the other thing we've done down the bottom too is you'll notice that when you do add an effect, there's a larger effects icon down the bottom because that was a bit hard to catch sometimes. So one thing that's also worth noting, all these effects are designed for feature film users, but we think they're also a lot of fun for everyone. But a good example of this is the lens flare and the lens distortion. They actually simulate actual lenses. So these go well beyond simple NLE effects because they're effects designed for high-end work, but at the same, so that we have to do them in a different way. They have to be sort of almost accurately implemented versus just making them look like like a lens effect. So they're really very, very high quality effects. There's also new titles and a titles palette. We have some really nice titles. We've upgraded some of the titles, but we've also got some new Fusion titles which use the Fusion engine.
Oh my
So let's
God.
add a title and see what it looks
I
like.
have been waiting. Oh my God, I've been waiting.
Timeline, a little bit of space.
I've been waiting for.
So we've got a nice title here.
Like this, because they haven't talked about this in the edit page.
I should move it across because it's getting in the way of the
where you can just
burn effect, as you can see it there.
What the freaking text looks like before you put it and add it to the timeline. You can literally see it. I couldn't do that for some reason. I couldn't do it before, but now that you could do it here, this is a big thing I've been.
Now we also have some new timeline features. You've noticed that we've got a much thicker CTI now. It just looks much more substantially larger, and it's a bit easier to read and grab hold of. The other big thing we've got is when you insert a clip now, it'll keep its transitions.
I really hope.
So, for example, if I put a transition,
that this
I'll go back to
UI
the
setup
media pool,
for
and I'll select
cut,
a.
you can also use in the edit page
here's a nice
as
clip.
well. I'll be kind of disappointed if you can't use
point.
that in the edit page.
Just a 5-second duration, but I'll also put a dissolve on both these points here. When I drag that clip into this point, it'll keep the transition on both ends. Now, when I move a clip, it'll also keep the transition. So if I grab this clip and move it down to here, it'll move the transitions with it. We've also made some improvements to the timeline spacing. So when you go down to a large viewer, it doesn't have as much free space here. One of the other things we've done is if you're using a moving CTI, like where the CTI moves a bit like the edit page, we've now added the proper scroll bar in so you can scroll around. And this now works exactly the same as the edit page does. And if you want to work like that, then that's exactly the way the edit page works. Although I really quite like the fixed CTI. It works really well with a hardware panel when using a fixed CTI. We've also got another new feature in the cut page called audio trimming. This new button here, if you click this button here, when you do an edit, it'll turn the clips into audio waveforms, so it helps you do your trimming against the audio, and when you release it goes away. The other thing we support is alpha channel keying in the timeline now, so you can drop clips in with alpha channels, and there's also a new chroma keyer, so you can do chroma keying in the timeline, and there's actually more information in the edit video, which I'll play next. Now we also have a redesigned inspector, so if I go and click, there's an inspector button up here now, and you can see that the information is now all ordered by topic. So it helps you organize yourself. You can see what's what, including metadata changes, video changes, and more. Now the inspector is common between the cut, edit, and media page, so you get some commonality, and also the inspector live updates. So let's have a look at that. So if you go to the audio and you do make some changes here, now when you scroll along, you'll see it live tracks. Now the inspector works on both the timeline and clips in your bin now. And you can also edit time code and dates. So if your time code and dates aren't right, you can also change those. So let's check that out. So if I've got a shot here, I go into the file, I can change the date, make that the 10th. You can also open transitions in Fusion, and there's more information on that in the Fusion video coming up. Now there's also been some big updates to the bin. It now correctly flattens the bin in the source tape. And that's really important because the source tape eliminates media management. You don't need to do media management with the source tape because you can visually browse. So let's have a look at that now. So I'll close the inspector. I'll click the source tape button here. And you can see now all my media is flattened out, even though the media is inside a folder. But if you have a lot of clips, it can get really hard to manage. I've got one friend who's got over 200 hours of clips. You know, the client just keeps bringing in more and more media every day. So the new bins are much more powerful in DaVinci Resolve 17. Now we have this new feature called bin dividers. So to see this, let's load in more media so we can kind of create a large group of media. Now this media I'm going to load in from a different job, but it helps show how this all works. I've got some media from a cooking show video, so let's load that in. Now I've got all my media in the one bin. So now what you can do is you can see the bin dividers are actually showing us dates. Now we can see these bin dividers even if we go into icon view or clip view, there, or even in list view. See, there they are there. So as I'm scrolling through the source tape, I can see that it'll track me. I can see what's going on. I've got a lot of media here. Now we've also added new sort modes. So there's other sort modes that we can use, and the bin dividers will change based on the sort mode. So let's have a look at the sort menu here. You can see we've got a lot more items in it. So we can actually now sort by clip name. And you'll see the letters. So now the titles have become letters. Reverse sorted. Or I can even sort by clip color. But of course there's no color assigned to any of these clips, so they're all the same. And I can also sort by scene and shot. Now you can see scene 1. Oops. Now the bin has an unsorted section for any clips that don't have metadata. But we can use the new inspector to organize these clips. So let's check that out. Now let's go into this clip here and we'll open the inspector up. Go to file and we can see we can actually got no scene information in here. In fact, if we go and click on that one, you can see it says scene 1. I'll click on this one, it says there's no scene information. Now we can update these clips really quickly. I can select on auto select the next clip, so it makes it even faster. I can then type in scene 2 and enter. And now it's gone and automatically what it's done is it's gone and taken that clip, added scene 2 to it, it's sorted it in the bin to scene 2's location, and it's automatically selected the next clip that doesn't have any metadata on it. So I can just go through here and update each one of these. Let's make some of them scene 3 as well, so it'll give us some variation. And now you can see that the bin has sorted them all and they've all been assigned their spots. Now normally you just copy what's on the slates into this metadata here so that the clips would actually match the slates that have been done. Or obviously the metadata could come out of the camera and the clips, like these clips for example already say scene 1 because they come out of a Blackmagic Pocket Camera 4K and that has metadata support. But what it means is that the bins are always sorted correctly, even if you're going to the timeline and doing work on the timeline. I'll close my inspector. Or you go back, whenever you go back to the source tape, your bins are all resorted, you don't have to keep doing it all the time manually. Now another powerful feature is we can actually then focus the source tape by the metadata. So this is really exciting. What it means is that we can zoom into a region by pressing the source tape button and it'll then focus on that region. So for example, if we're scrolling along and we're now in scene 2, if I push the source tape button again, it'll only show me scene 2. So it means I can go into scene 2 and then work just on scene 2. If I push escape, it'll come back out. And if I scroll along, I'm in scene 3, push the source tape button, now it's in scene 3. Push escape, it'll go back.
That's really cool.
Normally the source tape, if you put an in and out point, pushing source will focus on the area between the in and out points. But if you don't have an in and out point set, it'll allow focus on the region. So now I'm in scene 1, I can go and click the source tape button again, and now it's showing me just the Winter Wonderland media from London, and it's not showing me that new cooking show stuff that I bought in because it's zoomed into scene 1 and all these clips are all being tagged as scene 1. Now you can do that with any type of metadata. But all this lets me move between scenes really quickly. and then focus in and zoom into the scene that I'm working on, and zoom back out when I want to see everything. Now all this works much faster on the speed editor, so let's just pop across here for a second and have a look. And you see how this all works, because we've got these big buttons for the source tape and the timeline on here, so it's really quick. Now you'll notice it's actually running. If I scroll up and down the source tape, here you can see like there's nothing plugged in. So obviously it's Bluetooth, and that's how it's working. It's got a couple of big batteries in it too. So let's have a look and see how this works on the speed editor. So I can just scroll up, and if I push source, I go in, and I push escape, and I come back out again. I can scroll down here and push source, and now I go into scene 2. And if I push escape, I come back out. And if I want to scroll down to the scene 1 media, I just push source, and there I am. So you can see really how fast that is. The speed editor makes it so much quicker to do this. It's much more and this is a much more natural way to navigate media. You know, it's really based on what the shot is and not where it's kind of located on your disc. And from an editing point of view, that's much better. I mean, all the editing software is always focused much on really where your shots are on the disc, and that's not really the way you edit. What you want to know is what the shots actually are. So we think this is a whole new way to visually navigate media, and with this focusing, it's really much more exciting, and it's much, much more powerful. So let's go back and we'll see what we can also do, because we can still navigate by file path. So let's have a look back here. Now, you might be getting folders of shots from clients, you know, and like my friend was, and you want to really look at the folder. You might be scrolling along and see something in the folder and go, hey, what else is in there? So we can show you that the file path feature in the new cut page is also much more powerful. So you can see the file path up here now, and that's showing the folder where the media is. And as I scroll around, you can see the path will change. So what that also means is I can navigate down the path as well as up the path. So if I click on that, now the source tape is showing me just the content in that folder. And if I click back, I get everything. I can scroll along to these shots here, and I can then click on the cooking show. I can see just the cooking show clips. And every time I do it, the source tape rebuilds. So it allows me to navigate by file path if I really want to. And it rebuilds every time. Another problem we have is icon view is not very detailed. There's not a lot of information with it. And the list view has no image. You can see if I look at these three these three bin views, there's just not a lot of information on them. This one doesn't have any visual of what you're doing, and this one doesn't have a lot of information. So we have a new view called metadata view. If you click on that, you can see we've got a metadata tile. In fact, I'll scroll up and down the source tape. In fact, I'll go back to master so we can see everything. And you can see the media there. So this lets you see the clip and its information. And the title will change based on the type of sort you do. So for example, if I sort by time code, you'll see the title change. So let's sort by time code. And you can see now it's a date and time code. If I sort by scene and shot, it goes back to showing me the scene and the shot. And the title changes every time. All this makes editing scripted work a lot easier. And the bin dividers remove all the manual work of working out where you are. You can move from scene to scene. It's just seamless. You can zoom in, zoom back out again. You can select shots visually. It's all automatic and instant. As soon as you select the source tape, all this happens for you. It's all assembled for you automatically. So it's very exciting. Now there's also a lot of other cut page features, so I'll show you some of those now. Now DaVinci is much, much better at relinking clips. So if you've moved a folder, you can relink clips really quickly.
Tens of thousands of dollars, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you get all of this.
Let's go back to the
$300
clips and we'll have a look.
And even if
what we'll do is we'll move one of our folders. We'll create a new folder here, and we'll move our Winter Wonderland media into there. Now the interface will have lost track of all that media. See, it's all gone offline. So if you move media and you want to relink, you can do that really easily. And the relink icon's up here. It'll now show a relink. It'll enable. I can select a location. Back to the desktop, there's my untitled folder. There it is, and when I select it, it relinks all the media for me. There it is. So it's super fast now to relink media. There's now a whole new media manager as well, which lets you export projects out and pass them to other people. So let's check that out. So we go into the media management. I get a new media manager window. I can export out a timeline, and I'll export out the edit I just did. I'll also create some low resolution proxies. Let's do something in 720p. And what I'll also do is I'll put some handles on my media. And now what it's doing is it's rendering out all my content. Now this is in addition to the regular archive feature. The archive feature, you can take all your media and give it to someone. The problem is often that's too big to send. So what this allows you to do is send just the media for the single timeline, but only enough media to support it. And you can also, as I just did, export with handles, and you can export the raw media or the transcode, and I just did a transcode. Now this means you can send the timeline and the media to another user, and they can then work that timeline and then return it back to you, and it'll relink back to the original media. So say, for example, if you wanted to send a timeline to a colorist so they could do a better color correction, they could send you back a new type of file called a DRT file, which is a DaVinci Resolve timeline file. When you load that back in here, it'll recreate the edit. So let's see how that works. What I do is I'll create a new project. And I'll load in my media that I just created on the desktop. There it is there. And there's the shots I need. And I'll also load in my DRT file. Now the DRT file is a timeline file, so it's very small. There it is there, there's my timeline. So this is what it would be like if I was a colorist and I've just imported the media you've given to me and the timeline. So if I go to the color page and I select some of this, wow, look how small the color wheels are in this view. So I'll just create a horrible looking grade. There it is there. So we go back to the cut page. Now what I can do is I can export out the file. I can export the timeline, desktop. Now if I go back to my other project, I can now see what the colorist has given me by importing that timeline file. There's my new color correction. That's got my terrible color grades in it. There it is there. And that's relinked back to the original media. So the great thing about this is only the timeline file needs to be sent back. And the DRT timeline files are really small, so they can be emailed. Now the remote user can also send you constant updates. So if you've got someone who's doing a large job and they're doing constant work, they could keep sending you DRT files back, and you can just keep loading them in. It'll link back to your original media, and you can see the work they're doing as they're progressing. There's also been some improvements in the viewer. We've got a full screen button now, so you can go full screen and play. I probably should get rid of this, change back to my original edit because my color grade wasn't good. We've also got safe area and safe title markers now, which you can turn on, and there's a menu for those. So you can set all kinds of aspect ratios. There's also a better quick export menu window as well now. You can see we've got more items in there and it fits better. So you can see there's some really nice updates to the cut page. But now let's have a look at the speed editor. So the big question, I guess, is why did we develop the speed editor? Well, we didn't want to waste space on a QWERTY keyboard, which we really felt like is probably designed sort of as a modification of a normal keyboard for traditional editing. But we wanted to design a keyboard specifically for the cut page. We wanted something to work better with laptops. We also wanted something that worked with your regular QWERTY keyboard. If you really like that keyboard, you can keep using it because this works in conjunction with it. That's why it was Bluetooth. So obviously, as I mentioned before, it's Bluetooth and it's got an internal battery. Now the USB, if you look at the back there, the USB can be used to charge it, or you can use it with USB if you don't want to use the Bluetooth. But the reason we did Bluetooth is there's no cable, so it can sit in front of your normal keyboard. And that's really important. Now I've got an overhead camera, so if we cut to that, we can have a look at the regions on the keyboard and I can explain what's on here.
I don't know how.
Now all the transport controls are on the right-hand side here.
Interesting choice.
There's a search dial on the right. That's a solid metal search dial with roller bearings. You got your shuttle, jog, and scroll buttons there.
Guys, let me know in chat.
Now there's timeline and source tape selectors. You know, when you push the timeline, you're on the timeline. Push the source tape, you're back on the source tape, as we did before. Now you really use all this with your right hand. Your left-hand side is for your editing functions, and that is what you use with your left hand. So what it means is you're sort of editing with both hands. You know, you're kind of looking for shots here, and you're working with your left hand. Now there's really large in and out buttons. And so the top, sorry, before I mentioned that, I forgot about the editing functions. The editing functions are up here, and this is where you do your smart insert, append, ripple, overwrite, close up, place on top, and source overwrite buttons. And you've got your big in and out buttons here. You can find them by feel. There's a slight gap in here so you can find them. And then there's a whole bunch of trimming modes, and that's an incredibly powerful feature of this. And then there's transition types. You can select between types of transitions. Now in the top middle, is the general functions. There's a whole bunch of random, well not random, but different functions here. In the lower middle is the camera controls for the sync bin, which I'll get to. And then of course you've got the play and stop bar, which is very traditional for a keyboard. So let's see what it can do and really show how fast it can be. Now I've got a monitor just below the camera here, so it lets me actually use the speed editor here while I'm talking to you. And we'll use the overhead camera so you can sort of see what buttons I'm pushing.
All right, over under. Let's have some fun.
And it'll be a bit more uncluttered than if I try to use it in front of the computer. So we've set up a separate monitor here. Now what I'll do is I'll create a new project and I'll import the Winner Wonderland clips into that so we can do some edits and we'll show you how it works. So I'll just pop back here for a moment to do that.
Actually, no. I'm gonna go. Let's do, because I think this is going to probably be around 600. I'll say let's do over under 600 because I think that would be more interesting. Because if it's 300, which is sort of like the switcher, I don't know.
My Winter Wonderland shots in there now.
But yeah, over under 600.
I'll also create a new timeline.
What do you guys think?
So we've done that now, and let's create some edits with the speed editor keyboard. Now what we'll do is we'll select the source tape so we can see what shots we want to get, and we'll scroll along to see what we want to get. Now, what we'll want to do is we'll want to select these shots and put them in the timeline. So we'll scroll around looking for nice shots. I'm just using the search tool. I'm using the scroll function. If I want to get really accurate, I can use jog.
Okay.
So let's get some of this shot there. That shot there looks good.
All right.
Place an in point.
We got some wages.
I'll place an out point. This is a very fast way to find shots.
I'm going 350.
And all I need to do is go and add in with the append button.
That's my guess.
I've got one shot in my timeline. Now we'll go and do it to another. So let's have a look around. Now I don't need to do anything, I can just keep looking for shots. There's an interesting looking shot. I'll append that. So I've got 2 shots on the timeline. So you just go along here looking for different shots. Now we can resize the viewer. There's a resize viewer button on here. And so if I push and hold this button, I can resize the viewer. So I can do that with the search dial. Now because we're looking for source media, we'll actually make the viewer nice and big. Now using in and out points is quite slow, so we can do it without doing in and out points. Now you'll notice on the front of the Smart Insert and the pen buttons there's a word clip. Now a bunch of buttons on this keyboard have secondary functions, and in this case by selecting those I can insert the whole clip without needing to put in and out points. So let's clear the in and out points, and then we'll go along and we'll just put some clips in. So let's append a whole clip. Let's have a look for something. Let's find some of the feel. That looks pretty good, so let's put that in. That's the whole clip, and we'll look for another store. That looks pretty good. Append that. Just did an autosave. Let's see what else we've got. Scroll along looking for something. Oh, that looks pretty good. I'll append that. I don't know why I got so many shots of food. That's probably a bad sign. So we've got a bunch of clips in the timeline. I just added those in just by pushing append. So you can see this is why it's so important when we start on the source tape, because you can just roll along looking for clips and drop them into the timeline. Well, now let's do some trimming. So we'll go back to the timeline. We can scroll along here and see some of these clips. Now we want to trim off a little bit of some of these clips so we can trim out. There's the trim out button here. So if you hold the trim out button, you can then trim and it live trims. I can also trim in. I can go down. Now you'll see that little smart indicator. See that little arrow there just above the edit point. That edit point shows you where it's going to trim. So you don't even have to do any in and out points or anything. You just have to hold trim. If I hold trim out, I can just scroll that back. If I go trim in, it'll do the next clip. I can scroll along here and do trim out. Trim in. I can even trim out at the end. So you don't have to select, it's very, very quick. You don't have to select any of the you don't need to select any in and out points or anything like that. So the great thing about that is that you can just, like, I think trimming is probably one of the most powerful functions of the keyboard and what makes it so fast. So now we've done some trimming, let's go and add some dissolves. Now you can select transitions down the bottom here just by turning on and off. So normally you've got to drag and drop transitions, or you can do a keyboard shortcut. We have a button that allows you to turn on and off dissolves. So let's do that. So go to the front of the timeline. I can pretty much push a dissolve, scroll along, and add transitions. Now everything's got a nice dissolve. I can play, and I've got my nice transition, and I can do additional trimming. Another thing I do is I can remove the dissolves just as quickly, so let's have a look at that. So if I roll along here, I can pretty much go along here and remove the dissolves just as fast. Now, I can also change the default duration of a dissolve, or I can change the duration. So if I put a dissolve back in, I can go along here and I can go transition duration, and I can change the length of it. So say if I want faster transitions that are 10 frames long, oops, there I am there. Now I can make that the default transition duration. So the way I do that is I double press, and that's because it's got a set key on the front. And if I double press the transition duration, now that'll be the default transition duration. So if I go along and create my transitions now, I missed one back there. Now they're all the same format, so I can change those anytime I like. Now some of the other rep modes is I can roll transitions and slip and clips. So let's have a look at that. So if I come down here, I can roll by pushing this roll button here. I can roll the transition up and down the timeline. I can also slip the clip. I can slip clips either side. I've got slip in, slip source. So I can slip the clip there, or I can slip the destination clip. I can also move a clip up and down the timeline, and that's very fast. So let's have a look, see how that works. So if I hold the move button, the clip will highlight and I can just drag it down and then release it. And now it's moved the clip up and down the timeline. I have a nice full screen button up here. If I want to play full screen, I can just go and push the full screen button and then play. I push the escape to go out of that. Now if I'm working and I want to trim and edit,
totally agree. Yeah, totally agree, Trevor.
What I can do is I might want to review that last edit. So if I double push the full screen button, it'll now take me a couple of seconds before the edit point and then play through it. So it's a really fast way of reviewing an edit in full screen. And if I double press it again, it goes right back to the same spot.
Because, man, just trying to get all the transitions the way you want it. So
there's also a button to adjust the audio level of a clip. I've got the audio level button just here. So if I hold that, I can adjust the audio up and down. You can see it there.
Now that they've really
as I adjust the search style,
the cut page,
see the audio level going up and down on the clip.
You can literally just do.
I can also add markers anywhere I want. If I double press, the word marker is in front of the audio level button. So if I double press it, now I get a marker. But quick turnarounds, you can now. So I can add markers if I need to fix something later. I want to come back to it. And in fact, if I want to change the color of the marker, it'll put down the marker that's on the right-hand side of the user, on the left-hand side of the user interface, just on the left of the timeline, lower timeline ruler. If I want to change the marker color, I double press and hold, and it'll bring up a nice marker color window. So I can select a new marker color. I can scroll along, and now all the markers will be that color. There's also a snapping function, but snapping works a little bit different with the speed editor. When you're using snapping in the UI, it tends to be magnetic. It'll snap onto the edit point. With the speed editor, what it'll do is it'll pause as you scroll through the edit point. So if I turn snapping on, there's a lead indicator to highlight it there. There it is there. Now as I scroll along, it'll stop and pause for a moment on markers, and it'll also pause on edit points. So it'll pause for a certain number of degrees of rotation of the search dial. That's how that works. Now, I can also insert new clips and keep the transitions with the speed editor as well. So if I go to the source tape and I go along and look for a new clip, so I want to get a bit of that. When I go and do a smart insert, it'll include the transition that was at that in point when I put the clip in, so that's really nice too. Now there's other edit modes in the keyboard that are much smarter because they're designed to work with the keyboard. Like the place on top, for example, places a clip on top of the current layer in the timeline. Ripple overwrite will replace the clip in the timeline, and if the new clip is a different length, it'll basically just accommodate it. So if it's shorter or longer, it'll basically change the space and swap out a clip. The close-up function is really smart. It uses some image recognition to do close-ups of people when they're talking. And it also now in DaVinci Resolve 17 copies the color grade. So when you do a close-up of a shot, if it's got a color grade on it, it'll copy the color grade to the close-up clip. But one of the most unique edit modes is actually called source override. It's extremely powerful for cutaways. So what I'll do is I'll do a quick multicam project, and you can see really how that works. So I'll go back over here and create a new project.
We'll see. Maybe they're still, and I'm speaking too early.
So I'll go over here, go new project. We'll create a new timeline. I'll also bring in our multicam media, which is our cooking show stuff. Now I'll come back to the speed editor and I can click source tape. I can find my wide shot. Now what I want to do is lay down a base layer from the wide shot. So I'll scroll along and have a look. Oh, there it is. So I'll go, well, actually I can just push the append button, it'll drop that whole clip down into the timeline. So there it is there. Now what I want to do is I want to create some cutaways. Now the first thing I'll do is I'll set it to video only, because once I've got my base layer, I've also got my audio track. Now what I want to do is find some video cutaways and drop them in. This is where it shows you what the source overwrite function really does. It's very powerful. So let's go back to my source tape. Let's look along and find, oh, we've got some nice shots there of, well, actually let's get the shots here where they're using the, they're cutting things. Let's have a look at that. So she's cutting something here. So if I go and create an in point on that and an out point, I can show you how the source overwrite function works. So now I've got that shot. Now the great thing about source overwrite, it'll place the shot in the timeline on the layer above, synchronized to that base layer, because this is a different camera view. So let's go and push source overwrite, and there it is there. Now if I go to the timeline and have a look at that, I'll see that cuts away nicely. So, and that's all synchronized. So you don't need to care about what you're doing. You can pretty much just run along looking for good cutaways.
That is
Anytime you find anything, you can drop another cutaway. So let's find another cutaway.
So if you're, I'm assuming it's
she's doing something there.
So
let's find a different,
so
we'll go to a different camera actually.
Audio, but if you sync your audio,
oh, the walk, this will be good. Yeah, there's some good stuff here.
Awesome. That is awesome, because now you don't. All you have to do is just like you
oh, that's good.
and then it automatically finds where the source is on the timeline and drops it there.
That bit there. Let's have a look at that.
Is amazing.
Put an in point. Out point. Source override. Let's look for something else. While she's putting in the ingredients. In. Out. Source override. So I can just pretty much go along and add in cutaways. And there's all my shots, and, and they're just laid on top. And you see they're perfect cutaways. Now that's great. You can just run along looking at all your camera sources, find different cutaways and drop them in, and they'll synchronize to the timeline for you. So it's very fast to use. But the problem is, what happens if you have multiple cutaways? This is where it gets really exciting, and this is what the sync bin is for. So the button up here for the sync bin, if I press that, what it does is it goes off and gets all my synced angles that synchronize to this point in the timeline and shows you all those angles at the same time. So you can see them all there. And I've got 6 different angles. So as I scroll along the timeline, I've got a bunch of different views and I can work out what to do. Now this is kind of the reverse of looking at cutaways, because before what we did is we added, we found a shot and added it to the timeline using the source override. The question, of course, is which cutaway. The sync bin shows us all the camera angles all at the same time. It tracks when we scroll along the timeline, so you can see what all the different angles are. And it means it does all the work for you. It's kind of like having an assistant editor that goes off and gets things. And this panel is really, really good for using the sync bin. So let's have a look at a shot number, and we'll go and find something else to add in. There's a good bit there where she's using camera 2. So we'll push camera 2. And you see it's automatically selected in an out point for us. Now we can trim that out point. So we can give a little bit more. I can even trim the in point back a little bit where she's stirring, and I can go and add that source override. Then I can go along and see what else we've got. There's a bit where she's putting something in the block there. So we can go camera 1. I can trim the out of that. And I can do a source override on that. So that's all pretty good. So that's all there is to it. You just go along and you can find which source is the best source and you can add that in. Now, one thing worth noting, if you've selected one of the camera numbers, say you camera number 2 and you don't want to select that, there's an escape key up on the keyboard here, so you can push that. In fact, if you double push escape, it does undo. But if you push escape, you come out of the camera. If you push a camera number, you go into the camera. Push escape, you come back out of the camera. So if you don't like the camera, you've selected, I don't want that one, just push escape and you come back out of it. Now that's really fast, but there's an even easier way of doing that than this. So let's have a look, and it's called live override. So if we scroll down the timeline a bit to where there's some action, I think there's a bit where she's plating up. So have a look where that is. Yeah, that's the bit down there. There's a bunch of stuff happening here. So let's have a look here. Now what we can do is we really like camera number 1 here. So if I hold camera number 1 and scroll along, it'll now live overwrite that into the timeline. I can scroll along until she's moved away from something else, and then she puts the plate down on camera 2. So I want to go to camera 2. So I can drop camera 2 down. That looks good. I can go back to the wide shot.
This is absolutely amazing.
And then I really like camera 3. That looks pretty good. You can see putting something in camera 3. So you can hold that down. There it is there. So you can see how powerful live override is. It basically just paints the shot into the timeline automatically. And you can see how easy it is to do a bunch of cutaways.
Come on, Grant.
But it's really quite easy to bump the jog
thing?
knob. You know, when you
price?
release, it'll finish on the out point. But you know, the jog knob's a little bit sensitive, and so I'll turn off snapping. So you can bump it a little bit. Sometimes you can put jump cuts in, you know, like little gaps in the timeline. So the speed editor has a dedicated live override button. So what that means is it transforms the keyboard into a bit like a switcher. So if I turn live override on, it acts a bit like a switcher. So the camera number buttons are lit up. So for example, which camera number do I like? Say I like camera number 1. So now when I scroll along, it'll scroll along, and undo is scrolling backwards. So I scroll along, and I kind of like camera 4. Now I push camera 4. I scroll along. Oh, actually, I'm going to go back and change that because I quite like camera 2. There's camera 2. And there's a bit on camera 6. Looks quite interesting, so I can scroll along. Basically, I'm just switching across and scrolling along, adding clips. So it's as simple as that, is scroll along and add clips. Now the transition type is indicated on the bottom here, and I've been doing cuts, but I can push dissolve, and now what it'll do is it'll transform into dissolves. I can also push the transition button up here.
Man,
so what I can do now is when I scroll along, everything will be a dissolve.
So
if I scroll along,
for
you go to 6.
Live events.
Sorry, I want to go to
like
4.
Maybe if you're recording live,
it'll do a dissolve to 4.
That'll
be the default transition. Go back to 6.
Like a smaller video of that.
Oh, go to 3. I like 3 there.
1080 file with like the ATEM
and everything's now a dissolve.
You can then
that's
like
pretty cool.
Go back.
Instead of selecting just dissolves, I can also select transitions from the transition palette.
And then just
there.
Do a live.
And then when I select a shot, I'll go to camera 1.
Making those transitions.
Then I'll add those transitions.
Be able to just like.
And they're different again.
Totally speed up the process.
Back to camera 3.
And there's so many times I've done.
And maybe camera 2.
I've done recorded shows.
And so on. And then when I go back to the timeline, now I've got all my cutaways and I've got the manual transition.
Like, okay,
and I can of course change that transition just by holding down the transition palette.
All right, deliver.
I might want to change to a ripple wipe. So you can still do all the trimming that you'd like to do. I can roll the edit. If I don't like the edit points, I can do all that. So I can scroll along, and there's my edit. So you can see how fast that is. Now what's really funny about this is that if that's not even fast enough, let's go back a little bit and I'll show you something we added as a bit of fun. So I'll go back to this point here. I'll go back into the sync bin, and I'll turn the live override function back on. Now we thought it'd be really funny is if a lot of times when you're editing, say a music video or something like that, it doesn't really matter what camera you cut to, and really quite on the duration that you are either. So we thought it'd be funny to create a random function. So if you push the live override button twice, it's got the word random on the front. It'll just pick a camera source and of a roughly random duration and just put it down. And if you keep doing it, it'll keep placing transitions. I can push dissolve and it'll do them with dissolves. And now, you know, this is not really the best media for it, but if I go back to the timeline, now I've got pretty much a random edit. Oops, go back to the timeline. And I've got this sort of random edit that if that was a music video or something, that can be a lot of fun. And you can, you know, sometimes it works quite well. But again, you can go in and trim if you need to trim. So I've really only shown you, editing shots from a single camera, and I've shown you some multicam editing. But you can really see how much faster this is. So we think the speed editor is going to be really exciting. Now, the speed editor is just starting production now. It'll be priced at $295, and we think it's going to be very affordable and really help people adopt this sort of new way of editing. It's a really great combination of the hardware and software working together. But we'll be introducing it with a special offer. What we're going to do is we're going to bundle the keyboard, the speed editor, free with DaVinci Resolve Studio. So if you purchase DaVinci Resolve Studio at the $295 price, the keyboard will be included free. Now, if you buy DaVinci Resolve online, we can't do that because there's weird tax problems around the world. But if you buy it through a reseller, then we'll be able to get the keyboard and bundle that. So it'll be really exciting. So it means you don't need to buy both. You don't have to buy the DaVinci Resolve Studio and the keyboard. You can just buy the DaVinci Resolve Studio and you get the keyboard for free. Now, this is just an introductory offer. It'll be available for the next few months, but we think it should be really exciting. So moving on, now the next step is the edit page. Now, we've got some really nice updates